I'm Olszewski, and welcome to People in Perspective. Today we have with us Jim Pogwizd, Custer expert. How are you doing, Jim?
I'm doing fine, Chris. Glad to be here.
So, how did your interest in the Battle of Little Bighorn begin?
Well, when I was about 7 years old, I watched a movie called They Died with Their Boots On, which was the story of George Armstrong Custer. And it just grabbed a hold of me. They showed the Custer as a brave, and which he was, and kind of a daring and dashing young man. And the battle scene, well, that kind of caught my eye. It's all these soldiers in the do-or-die situation, kind of comparable to what people are, their interest in the Alamo and 300 Spartans. And anyway, when I saw this movie, it left such a profound influence on me that I watched every Custer cavalry movie I could from then on. I read books, magazines, whatever I can get my hands on, anything pertaining to the 7th Cavalry and George Armstrong Custer.
So, you collect toy soldiers. How did that begin?
Well, as I said, when I became enthused about the 7th Cavalry and General Custer, I had, when I was young, Marx had made a playset, Fort Apache, with cavalry figures and Indian figures, and I played with them as a youth. A number of years later, I was walking through, I believe it was Marshall Fields at that time anyway, and I saw that they had cavalry figures comparable to what I collected. And I bought a couple, and I heard about a fella who was selling cavalry figures, and got a chance to meet him, and I started collecting, and for 35 years I've been collecting figures. I've made friends all over the world. My collection includes just not only 7th Cavalry figures made in the United States, but all over the world.
What types of toy soldiers do you collect?
Well, mostly 7th Cavalry in plastic, metal, and resin. They're about 2¼ inch tall. They're 54 millimeter. And I've got a number of them. My collection's not as big as some other toy soldier collectors are because I centralize just on one theme. But it's an interesting collection.
So, how did you become an expert on the battle?
Well, that's kind of a misnomer. Let me just explain. The battle is a mystery. And with the mystery, my opinion and your opinion are on par. Now, I may have had the opportunity to research it and read and all that, but because it's a mystery, you might be just as right or wrong as I am. And so I'm a student of the battle. And I belong to various organizations. Every year, during the anniversary of the battle, they come up and they go to the battlefield. The only bad feature is they don't trade information. They kind of take their stands and they wind up arguing amongst themselves. They're still fighting the battle 135 years later.
Why are they still fighting the battle?
Well, the bad thing about it is when you become so versed in a subject, you feel that you know it inside out. And so what you do is you kind of throw it out there, and anybody who doesn't agree with you, you form a posture, well, I've got the answer. And so that's the bad thing about it. But again, because it's a mystery, that's what makes it so fascinating.
Have you ever given any lectures on the battle?
I have lectured on 6 occasions, and those lectures are either in the process of being published or will be published. So it's not just on the Little Bighorn, it's about the 7th Cavalry or the Cavalry of the West in general.
What was life like in the 7th Cavalry?
Well, it really wasn't a romantic existence. It was hard work, little pay. You had a lot of foreigners in there who couldn't find jobs elsewhere. Strict discipline, sometimes to the extent of being cruel. You can go and do a 2-year hitch and never see a hostile Indian. So the idea of constant Indian fighting, even though it was a 25-year period, it just wasn't like that. There wasn't constant Indian aggression.
So what were the events leading up to the Battle of Little Bighorn?
Well, the real bad guys were the railroad and who influenced our politicians at the time to build a railroad through the Black Hills. It's kind of ironic because after the Custer battle was over, it was for naught because the railroad changed their mind and used another direction.
So why did Custer and his immediate command get slaughtered on that day?
Well, first of all, you got to give the Indians credit. It was their day. But Captain Benteen was told, bring packs, big village. He was supposed to come to Custer's defense. Well, after a 2-hour wait, the Indians closed in, and the rest is history. Could he have won? It's hard to say. He certainly, if Benteen would have come in, he certainly could have relieved Custer, and possibly many of them would have gotten out alive.
Now, Had anybody been reprimanded after the battle for their actions?
Well, the Army kind of took it on the jaw with this one. The president approved the plan, which was a very poor plan. 3 columns not in sync with each other, converging on an enemy they don't know where he's at. And so what happens when the disaster occurred, it was kind of like everybody pointing at everybody else. And the president and General Sheridan, General Sherman, who had originated the plans, they come up and they kind of said, well, it's Custer's fault. Well, he's dead, so he can't put up any defense.
Have you ever been to the battle?
Was there on the 100th anniversary of the battle, 1976. And what I was telling you before about there's hostility there, the National Guard was going to be called out because of the fact that they had worried there were going to be repercussions.
So why were there be repercussions?
Well, I guess you might attribute to political correctness. People are still fighting the battle today. They're concerned about what happened to the Indians, and they see the Custer battle as a symbol, if you will, of white aggression or white imperialism. Manifest destiny is not a dirty thing. It wasn't a dirty word, and it was a solid foundation. Millions of people were coming from the Europe and Asia, and they had no place to go. They couldn't allow 10 or 20,000 Indians to come up and say, you've got to stop here. So it was a clash of cultures.
Well, what was Custer like as a man?
Well, I guess he would be the modern equivalent of a rock star. He had tremendous success in the Civil War when he was a young man. And so what happens is, after the Civil War was a war in which both sides were very fervent about. Well, after the Civil War, the Indian Wars, if you will, they were like police actions. So you didn't get the same type of soldier enthusiasm. You've got dregs of society, people who used the opportunity to go west to go to the gold fields. So Custer had a rough time. He had personal flaws too. He was arrogant because of his success. He was a nepotist. He had his relatives all around him. But was he brave to a fault? Was he a great soldier? Yeah, he was.
Now, what has your favorite part been of this whole journey about learning about the Battle of Little Bighorn?
Well, the battle itself. Again, it's these 210 men fighting against all odds. It's funny because the Indians were thought that they were going to run. They didn't. But anyway, it was a tremendous struggle. And again, it's the mystique, the aura that nobody is certain what really happened. The Indians would tell their version of it 20 years later. They felt that there was going to be repercussions. So what happened was nobody knows for certain.
Well, thank you for coming today. It was a pleasure to learn about the Battle of Little Bighorn. I'm Chris Olszewski, and join us next time on People in Perspective.